Our guest on this episode is none other than Dr. Laurence Kotlikoff, a distinguished economist, best-selling author, and renowned expert in financial planning. Dr. Kotlikoff's illustrious career spans academia, policy advising, and prolific contributions to the media landscape. He's a professor of economics at Boston University, a fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, and has served as an economic advisor to governments and organizations around the globe. Dr. Kotlikoff is not only an accomplished researcher with over 200 published papers, but has also authored numerous books. He is a sought-after speaker providing invaluable insights on economics and financial planning. And today we have the privilege of tapping into Dr. Kotlikoff's wealth of knowledge. So without further delay, I would like to introduce Ed Siddell, the retirement trainer, and Dr. Laurence Kotlikoff.
Hey, Larry. Good morning. How are you, sir?
Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Thanks for joining us this early on a Monday or Friday morning.
Yeah, no problem.
Well, I really wanted to talk about your book. I read your book. It was obviously you're an expert in Social Security, and I think this is information that most people just don't even know about. The clawback. I mean, everyone knows that Social Security is in trouble, but the things that you talk about and you share in this book, it's I think it's something everyone should read. And especially at the very least, watch your interview on 60 Minutes, because
no question. I'm just gonna fix this. I'm just looking at the background here.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and I want to show you close this door too. Yeah, no, we kind of discovered this stuff through time, and now it's starting to get known how abusive the agency is without being partisan. You could just see this is bureaucratic incompetence and nastiness and abusiveness
At the highest levels.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about dysfunctional in your book, but it's abusiveness. And it spans the spectrum of from those that are, disabled to, I mean, I cannot believe that they can claw back without any kind of statute of limitations. Honestly, we deal a lot with Social Security. When we do our plans, we don't, really count Social Security. And most people don't understand it, but I'll tell you what, the clawback, that's the first I'd ever heard of it. So you're an expert. So if you don't mind, just kind of give a little bit of your background for everyone, just so that they kind of have an idea as to, who you are, where you teach, those kind of things.
Yeah. So we're recording, right? Okay, so good.
Yep.
Yeah. So great to be with you, Ed. The background is that I became an economist, went to grad school, and have been working at this area for a long time. I'm not a baby anymore. The interest in economics kind of stemmed from just being able to connect something concrete with the ability to help people. So economics really can model all kinds of things, from climate change, carbon policy, to optimal taxation, to congestion pricing. New York City is adopting different tolls for being in the center city starting this year to reduce congestion. So it's got so many applications. It's so powerful. If it's done right, it can really help society, can help people. And also personal finance, I got into working in that area and developed 30 years ago now a software company that makes economics-based financial planning tools to help people with like Social Security decisions and retirement decisions. So anyway, it's kind of like everybody has their own kind of pet cause to try and help others, right? Most people who aren't jerks are interested in some kind of charitable endeavor, right? So I was able to combine my profession with doing something kind of charitable. Say, develop a software tool that we think is much better than what's out there, that are people that are being used, and work for free for your company for 30 years, which has been the case. They've never taken a penny from developing these tools. And don't take any venture capital, because those folks are going to try and kind of screw up the software to make to do something quick and dirty that we don't think I don't think would be appropriate, because you have to sweat the details when it comes to personal finance. Anyway, so all this got me into learning a lot about Social Security, because for developing the tools, I had to become an expert in every single kind of provision of Social Security. And then I started learning about the horror stories. And I think this is what kind of led you to want to have me on the podcast today, which is to discuss my new book, Social Security Horror Stories. This is with Terry Savage. She's a well-known personal finance journalist. And you can see this claw coming out of the middle of the page. Social Security, it's called Social Security Horror Stories, Protect Yourself from the System and Avoid Clawbacks. It's available at Amazon. If you just look for Social Security Horror Stories and my last name, Kotlikoff or Savage, you'll come to it. It's a self-published book, so you can only get it at Amazon.
All right. So let's talk about your book, because the horror stories, it doesn't even begin to describe the stories that you lay out in your book as it relates to the clawback. So, if describe what the clawback is first, and then, share a couple stories with us, because I was shocked. Like I said, I've been doing this, going on 30 years myself, and I'd never heard of this before. And honestly, it was appalling. An absolute abuse of power, I think. So what is a clawback?
Yeah, so a clawback is where Social Security claims, without any proof whatsoever, that maybe for the last 10 years they've been overpaying you, and you now owe them $67,000. I've seen clawbacks for as low as $175 and as high as $304,000. So the the system is complicated, and in order for them to get your benefits right, they need to get information they don't have. For example, if you've worked in Chicago as a school teacher for your entire career, and then maybe half your career, and then you worked in the private sector and started paying into Social Security, because this school systems, local governments do not have to participate in Social Security. Anyway, unless Social Security knows how much your pension is from your Chicago teacher teaching job, they will not get your pension right, your Social Security benefit right, and therefore they can overpay you for year after year after year until they figure out somehow indirectly. It might be that your spouse comes in and they start asking oblique questions, and your spouse reveals that you're getting this pension, and you think you've been getting the right number. You might even have gone in and told them about the pension, and they didn't process the information. So the whole system is screwed up fundamentally, the way it's being run. They've got 60,000 employees. The software appears to be making humongous mistakes in sending out benefit reports that are obviously wrong. It takes me to kind of look at these benefit reports that people send to me, and then I contact Social Security people that I know, and it takes them 6 weeks to get their benefit calculators fixed up. I don't know why they're sending out, we discussed this in the book, these mistaken statements that they put online or that they send physically. So it almost seems like the things being hacked. So let me just give you a couple stories here. So you have and this was featured on 60 Minutes. Terry Savage and I were on 60 Minutes. So if you Google our names and 60 Minutes, and you look at the November 5th episode of 60 Minutes, it's the second segment with Anderson Cooper. And there was one kid on that show. He's 32. He's got cerebral palsy. When he was 11, he was collecting what's called supplemental security income, basically welfare benefits for disabled children.
Hmm.
And all of a sudden, after he'd had 3 operations, Social Security must have sent over some kind of a medical person who decided, hey, you no longer have cerebral palsy. Of course, it's not curable, but they
Right.
decided he doesn't qualify for this benefit anymore. So they sent him his mom a notice that the benefit's going to be cut. She objects or she appeals, and then for the next until it gets adjudicated that he cannot get these benefits any longer, he's getting paid like $5,000 over this period. Not he, but his mom's getting the money. Okay,
Right.
he knows nothing about it. He's
Because he's a
11.
minor.
He's 11.
Yep.
So now he's at 32. All of a sudden, out of the blue, into the mailbox comes this claw. Here's the claw, right? That's why we put the claw in the picture of the book, and it says you owe us the $5,000. Now, he knew nothing about it. His mom has passed away. He still has cerebral palsy. He's making barely minimum wage, and so he objected, and he also contacted me because I've been writing about this in my Substack newsletter. It's just, if you just Google Kotlikoff and Substack, you'll come to my newsletter. You can get a subscription for free, and we have podcasts and newsletters.
Hmm.
Anyway, so he's being he objects. He goes and asks him what's going on. Takes him 2 years to find out where this is coming from. What's going on? He knows nothing about it. Nothing about supplemental security income benefits. He finally meets somebody at one of the Social Security offices who says what I just said. And then he said, well, where's the proof? Where's the evidence that somebody came and actually adjudicated me not to be disabled after I had my 3 operations so I could walk? And they said, well, we don't have any proof. You have to just depend on our saying that this happened. That's one case. Another case, a lady becomes disabled and then writes a children's book, and it becomes a bestseller. First book she ever wrote. Quite surprising. So she starts getting some royalty income, and you can have a bestseller without getting that much money. I'm a best-selling author, and I've never gotten rich off of that book because I had 3 co-authors, and there's an agent, and the royalty rate's low to begin with. The publisher takes all the money. So anyway, she got enough money such that if it was earned income, she could not collect her disability. So every year for 10 years, she calls Social Security, hey, I'm getting this royalty income, and can I still be collecting this disability benefit? And they say, well, it's royalty income, it's not earned income, so therefore, yes. And then they decide, after like 15 years, that she owes $304,000. Why? Because they've decided that the royalty income is actually earned income because she went to some libraries and gave some talks about the book. And it's a children's book. So you can imagine that they paid her like a 1099 to compensate her for the transfer for the gas, right?
Right.
Now all of a sudden they decide that 10 years of disability benefits are actually of those benefits are actually not payable because she was getting too much earned income. Before they said it was royalty income. So, okay, so she appeals it. It goes to, after a couple of years, to administrative law judge being paid by Social Security, who then, and I read his judgment. He says, well, two things have to be true for me to waive this. One is it has to be our fault. It was our fault. We did tell you it was a royalty income, not earned income. Secondly, you have to be poor. And I've looked at all your financial records. She had to send in every single statement about everything she was spending money on for years. And I've looked at your cable plan that you sent to us. It has a lot of channels. Therefore, you cannot be poor. Therefore, you have to pay us $304,000. I read this in black and white. I can't, I could
Because of the cable
swear
bill.
on, my children's lives if this was the case. Okay. I should have taken a
That's
picture of it.
unbelievable.
It's, and it goes on and on. I mean, it's not, people have their earnings history screwed up. Uh, it can be, so they're clawing back children based on what their parents did or didn't get. There's no due process. This is not, again, about going after Social Security per se. Both Terry and I think Social Security is vital. I think a modern version of Social Security is vital
Yeah.
because people aren't saving enough. They're not buying enough life insurance. There's all kinds of insurance protections that Social Security provides. But and this is under Democratic and Republican administrations, the people running the show have just not given a damn. And there's 10,000 claims administrators who get to decide whether or not to destroy your life. Maybe you're 83 and you just had triple bypass surgery and you've gotten an $80,000 bill, and they say, and you can't, you're living just off Social Security, you owe
Right.
us money, or we're going to stop your check in 3 weeks, 4 weeks. And that's exactly what's happening to 2 million people. 2 million people are getting clawed back. And then, so the book's about those clawbacks, one terrible story after the next, half the book. The other half is about the scams the system is running. Now
Because it's really only one way, isn't it? I mean, they want their money back, but when they give you misdirection and you misfile, you don't get any of the money back that's actually due and owed to you, right? So, I mean, it's really just a one-way street, isn't it?
Well, that's the other thing. Social Security can be underpaying you. So my company's software, we have a tool called Maximize My Social Security, can be used by people to see if they're getting the right benefit. So that's
Mhm.
one of the things we say in the book. But yeah, they can be underpaying people without people knowing. I mean, they can be underpaying you just because you haven't filed for a benefit that you didn't know you were eligible for. So our software figures out everything you're eligible for, and then says, go get these benefits. So I have a friend, for example, I talk about in the book, 94 years old. She's a working psychologist. She was married 3 times. The first husband was a very high earning husband, and he died, a long time ago. And she had no idea that she could collect benefits from a deceased ex-husband to whom she was married like 25 years. And so she's probably given up $1 million of benefits. Nobody from Social Security ever told her, hey, you could collect this money. And so she's gone 30 years. She's now 94. From age 60 on, she should have been collecting these benefits. And now we're going to go file for her benefits. She's going to get 6 months retroactive divorce spousal benefits, and that's widow's benefits, and that's it. So they're screwing, sorry for using that word, but that's the right word.
No, you're fine.
Widows benefits, widows, we got I and a whistleblower at Social Security down in Philadelphia named John Adams. We blew the whistle on what we call the widows benefits scam, where they get widows to sign up for both their widows benefit and retirement benefit at the same time. And as a consequence, they have really stolen from 13,000 plus widows what the Inspector General of Social Security has now decided is over $130 million. So it's not like, we are making stuff up that Social Security itself isn't admitting. Their Inspector General says, hey, back in 2018 in a official report, you have worked over these people. You've stolen $130 million from 13,000 people. Go fix that. And they've done nothing.
Well, I think that's the most fascinating thing, about the book. It's not just, anecdotal stories. They're based on fact. You actually have copies of the letters, in the book. And then, you have the Inspector General report as well. We've always said this, and I like the fact that you actually made this comment and actually, put it, a big portion of the book calling Social Security a Ponzi scheme. So why do you say, or why do you call it a Ponzi scheme? Because it's very eloquent the way that you lay it out in the book.
Oh, well, thanks. Well, so I thought about all these scams, and the scams really relate to misinformation, misleading people. And if you ask about where's all that coming from, and again, I'm not coming at this as a Republican or a Democrat, somebody who is a kind of far left Democrat, staunch Democrat, who thinks Social Security is the best thing since sliced bread. I think it's the best thing since sliced bread if it were running right. Okay.
Right.
But if it's running, and some other libertarians on the far right might think we don't need it. And, relative to the way it's working, they might actually be right. It might be better for people for it not to exist, given the way how badly it's being operated. But if you ask, how is it that the culture of Social Security was to deceive people? And we talk about 10 different scams in the book. But the first scam we talk about is the way it's been financed. The fact that the system and Congress has been, and both administrations have been pretending from the beginning, back 88 years ago, that this thing had a trust fund and this thing was fully funded, and that you had your account, and that this money was your money, and it was there for you, and it was safe. But the reality is that the trust fund is just basically a Social Security bank account. The money comes in, the money goes out. And then from the beginning, they took money from young people and gave it to old people. And they said, don't worry, when you're old, you'll be able to go to the next generation, your kids, and expropriate them, take money from them and give it to yourself. And then they'll be able to expropriate their kids. That's a Ponzi scheme. That's a chain letter. That's just, economics 101 when it comes to what Charles Ponzi actually did. Now, why is the term expropriation appropriate here? Well, when I take money from somebody and I say, don't worry, you'll be able to take it from your kids. Well, that's true if your kids have enough earnings, if there are enough of those kids around to pay you, if that goes on forever. But when you know that you've had a baby bust and the economy's productivity growth has dropped dramatically compared to where it was before, the late 1800s, early 1900s, and even, early the 50s. And the economy has slowed down. We're a mature economy. We're not growing where labor earnings are growing at 2% real a year. They're growing 1% if we're lucky per person. So the money is just not there. That's why Social Security trustees report has that was issued in March 31st of last year. If you go to table 6F1, it's buried way in the back of the trustees report in the appendix. There's a table with cryptic language, but it shows a number 65.9 trillion. That's the unfunded liability of Social Security. That's the debt. They use words to keep it off the books. That's the off the books liability. And
that's not included in the 34 trillion national debt that we have. That's just a separate, off balance sheet.
Twice as book off balance sheet. We have much more off balance sheet debt.
Yes.
Congress has been running. So our fiscal situation is far worse than anybody understands, even in Social Security, because Social Security puts out two numbers. One is the what's called the infinite horizon fiscal gap in Social Security, unfunded liability, and there's also the 75-year number. The true number, which is the true long-term numbers, it's 60% of the short. Well, it's majority of the unfunded liability goes beyond 75 years. So in other words, we have to look at how we're going to be treating. It's not like our world is going to end in 75 years, that we can truncate this calculation and say, hey, we're not going to worry about our grandkids, not pretend that our grandkids are not going to be owed any benefits from this system. Doesn't make any sense.
Well, that was the question I had for you. So, based on the 75 years, because really they're saying that, in 75 years, everyone's going to die, right? And so there's no more benefits are going to be owed. So is that that 65 trillion, that unfunded liability, that's a misnomer, right? Because if I understand your book correctly, it's based on that 75-year premise, right? That's when it.
No, the 75-year numbers is 40% of the
Oh,
65.9.
okay. Okay, gotcha.
So
40% of
the
that. All right.
65, that's bad enough. But everybody in Congress who even, when they start talking about Social Security, the serious people,
Mm-hmm.
and I put that in quotes, they'll talk about the 40% of the $65 trillion number. They'll say, well, all we have to do is look out 75 years. Well, Alan Greenspan supposedly fixed the system with the Social Security Commission in 1983. They looked out 75 years. Here it is. How many years later are we? We're basically 50 years later. And so
Mm-hmm.
50 years into that 75-year window. So what they did is they operated on a tumor that they saw back in 1983. And they said, oh, this is a big tumor, but we're going to get rid of a half of it. And and now that tumor is actually, in economic terms, twice as big as it was when they operated back then. And now we have presidential candidates who want to either leave the problem off the table, which is, President Biden, President Trump, former President
Mm-hmm.
Trump, say just leave it off the table. And then we have other candidates like Nikki Haley, who I respect in many ways, and saying, well, we can just raise the retirement age. That is going to do so little, so late for raising the retirement age for younger people that, she's just not in the right ballpark. I mean, if that reduced the unfunded liability, the 65.9 trillion by $10 trillion, that would be a lot. Okay. So that's actually not an answer. And
So,
let me just be clear to people that when I say 65.9 trillion, that's in the Social Security Trustees Report, Table 6F1, Roman 6F1, and it's all the projected benefits minus all the projected receipts, minus the trust fund, which is a measly couple $1 trillion,
mm-hmm.
all present valued. So it's not like we're leaving out anything about the money coming in. Okay, it's after you take into account all the money that's going to come in, that we're $65.9 trillion short. So the country, and that's just Social Security. We're not talking about Medicare, Medicaid, defense spending.
Yep.
The whole projected fiscal gap for the country shows we're completely broke. And I've been writing.
I saw that the estimated CBO report for unfunded liabilities. I think that the last time it was roughly 165 trillion all in, and now it's pushing over 180 trillion on top of the 34 trillion that
CBO, even the CBO is doing the wrong calculations because
it's low. It's low. If they're saying it's 180, 100, whatever it is, it's significantly lower than what it actually is.
you can't. Yeah, I do have on my website kotlikoff.net a spreadsheet that has the latest properly calculated fiscal gap, and the absolute number depends on how you're discounting these things, and you really want to discount these things at kind of the return to what U.S. wealth can earn in invested here or invested abroad.
Mm-hmm.
And that's about 6.5% real in the post-war. So the absolute number is small, but the present value of GDP, when you discount at this high number, is also small. So the ratio says that, fundamentally, we need to be raising every single stream of revenue by almost 50% from now, starting today through the end of time, in order to be able to pay for all the outlays that we have projected to do for Social Security, for defense, for the president's lunch, for you name it, for infrastructure. So we
Right.
basically need an enormous tax hike or an enormous spending cut, or we have to do things much more efficiently, like deliver health care to our country in a much cheaper way. We're spending 18% of GDP when we could be spending 11% like Sweden does. And Sweden is ranked 4th in terms of quality of healthcare. We're ranked 21st.
Right.
So it's not so much that things are helpless, that things are just being done so poorly, not just in Social Security, but everywhere. I mean, this, I don't know if you know this, Ed, but I ran for for president as a writing candidate in 2016 in order to put out a platform for how to fix the country, and talked to a lot of economists and said, let's think about every one of our major problems, and let's see if we can put it into 10 bullets how to fix things. Let's have the simplest possible plan so people don't have to read 50 pages about how to fix healthcare, because economists agree that there's 10 bullets, 10 things you have to do, and that's it. Okay. Social Security, same thing. 10 things, that's it. And it's right on my website. It's called You're Hired. It's not You're Fired, but it's You're Hired. That's the title of the book. And it's a free download. Anybody can read it. This is what so this is why I ran, not to win, because I couldn't even get my mother to vote for me. She was more keen on Hillary. And, but I wanted to have a platform. So there's a book, it's 100 pages. Here's how to fix education. Here's how to fix healthcare. Here's how to fix the banking system, because I've been working on all of these different issues all my life. And we could fix the banking system overnight, so we didn't have Wall Street basically taking the upside and leaving us the downside when there's a financial crisis, right? They put us at risk. They engage in, it's, they're risking our money. And then when things go south, they've got the FDIC to say, well, go to the government and they'll bail you out. When in the Great Recession, we had 17 major financial institutions, including the largest insurance company, including largest mortgage insurance companies, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, Commonwealth Financial, Bear Stearns, Lehman Brothers, Washington Mutual. All these companies went bankrupt, and the taxpayer was left with a huge bill. We can fix that, and that's in the book.
So like with Social Security, how would you fix that? I mean, increase the employer match, the FICA?
No, here's what I would do. The system is 88 years old. It needs to be retired. It needs to be that we pay off everything we owe to everybody who's contributed, who's currently collecting. They should get every penny back that they've been promised. But we say, look, as of today, if we're going to put in the reform today, nobody's going to get any more accrued benefits. They're going to have to keep paying FICA taxes. We're going to drop the FICA tax a bit and gradually reduce it to zero. But we're going to immediately implement a new system where everybody contributes 10% of their pay to their own, what I call, personal security account. And Wall Street has this sounds like a George W. Bush proposal. It's not, because his proposal was how to enrich Wall Street. My proposal is how to keep Wall Street having not a single thing to do with the system. So we all put the money in, we put 10% of our pay into our own account, but actually before that happens, half goes into our spouse's account, and half of our spouse's contribution goes into our account. So there's earning contribution sharing. So if we get divorced, we each walk away with the same size account. Bingo. And then the government makes contributions on behalf of the poor, extra contributions for the poor, the disabled, the unemployed. So we have progressivity, right? That's a part of the current system. So let's do a modern version of Social Security. Now, all the money that goes in there would be invested in the global financial marketplace. It could be the entire, international global financial assets, but it's done on a market-weighted basis. So you're investing, and it could also just be restricted to U.S. securities, but in that case, you'd be investing in all the 6,000 U.S. stocks in proportion to their size in the marketplace, and also all the bonds, government bonds, treasuries, corporate bonds, state and local bonds. So you'd be fully diversified. The government will guarantee that at retirement, your account balance would at least equal what you'd invested adjusted for inflation. So you have a zero real return. Everybody gets the same rate of return because everybody's invested in one mutual fund. This is just like, pretty close to what Singapore has done for decades. Take taxes, contributions from people, invest them collectively, have it be done by a computer. Don't rip them off. Let some broker rip you off, and you get a crappy retirement, and they charge a commission the entire way. And then this other person who's invested the same amount of money has a great retirement because they dealt with somebody who was honest on Wall Street. No, keep Wall Street out of this. Let my laptop handle the entire thing. My laptop could run the entire program. And then at retirement, your contributions that you've accumulated now, your account balance, would gradually be sold off over 10 years, you and everybody in your age cohort. So if I'm, become, let's say 57 in a certain year, everybody who's my same age, all our account balances, which have been bumped up if we somehow have less than what we put in adjusted for inflation, all that money is gradually through time over 5-10 years sold off. The assets are sold off and used to buy inflation index bonds for our cohort. And then starting at age 62, we start getting payments, annuities that are inflation adjusted because the underlying securities for our cohort are invested in these inflation index government bonds called TIPS that exist already. And then we get inflation protected income, and it's in proportion to what our account balances were when this happened. So if I have accumulated twice the amount of money because I put in twice the amount of taxes or contributions, I'm going to get twice the size of a pension than you. But this is a way to have no burden being left to our kids. It's a fully funded system. This is Bismarck. If he was the German chancellor who invented Social Security back in like in 1880 or so, and then different countries came up with their versions of Social Security, and it's always been pay-as-you-go finance. Let's take from the young, give to the old, take from the young, give to the old. That would not happen here. That would end. So this is exactly what corporate America did when they were running in the 1980s and 70s and early 90s, running the defined benefit pensions that were going broke because they were running Ponzi schemes at IBM and all these other companies. And they said, what we're going to do is basically stop the Ponzi scheme. We're going to pay off what we owe, but then we're going to put in 401k plans. That's the right reform, a modern version of Social Security. And will younger people be hurt relative to what they've been told they would be getting from Social Security, which is a system where taxes were not going to rise by 50%? Yeah, they will be hurt relative to that fantasy world, but that fantasy world is fantasy. So relative to what actually is going to happen to them, this is much better because here they're going to get something for real. Their money will not be invested, will not be dependent on what members of Congress decide they're going to get, but rather what the market is going to provide, and they're going to have a guarantee. So this is a modern version. It's in the book. You're Hired. It's really described in 10 bullets. I mean, I described it in more than 10 words, but 10 sentences. But
so in that same vein, Larry, so baby boomers right now, and those current retirees that are already receiving benefits, obviously they can't participate in that because they're receiving benefits, no longer generating income, as a whole. So is that why it's a gradual reduction and why everyone is going to continue to pay that FICA to
we have to pay off the accrued liabilities.
Okay.
But the accrued liabilities in present value, the 65.9 trillion, most of that is projected liabilities. In other words, keeping the system going. But if you look at the accrued liability, it's much smaller. So with the, when we do this reform, the personal security account system, we would, eliminate the vast majority of this unfunded liability. It's and then, to really will likely be zero, and we'd be able to drop the FICA tax initially a couple percentage points and then gradually reduce it to zero through time as we pay off what we owe under the old system. And then everybody. So now you say, well, I'm going to I'm going to feel bad because I'm going to have to pay 10% into something. I'm going to be now compelled as a 35-year-old to take 10% of my pay in addition to what I'm paying in FICA taxes. Will be lower, but not that much lower, and put it into this personal security account system where I'm now invested in every single stock a company in the country that's listed, 6,000 companies, in proportion to their size. So my money in Amazon will be much more than my money in some, a startup company that's listed on NASDAQ. But and I'll also be invested in all the treasuries that are being issued and the corporate bonds and state and local bonds. But you say, well, how would a 35-year-old feel about having to save 10% of their salary every year in this manner, with a guarantee, with progressivity, with contribution sharing between spouses? I think they'd feel great. I think they'd say, hey, now I've got something I can actually see. I've got something that's real about my retirement. And
Mine.
maybe I'll be able to cut back on my other saving.
Mhm.
And at least this I can count on, and this actually is, quite doable. And that's what Nikki Haley or Chris Christie or Governor DeSantis, they should be advocating this. I mean, Governor DeSantis wants to leave the whole thing off the books, off the table. Biden wants to do that. This is just generational abuse on top of bureaucratic abuse. I mean, we've got the bureaucrats abusing people unbelievably. I mean, this is
Oh,
financial
absolutely. I mean,
101.
it's political dynamite. No one wants to touch it because it's suicide. No one, e- everyone wants to be an ostrich, right? They just want to put their head in the sand and pretend like it's going to resolve itself. And everyone knows that it's broken. Everyone knows that it needs to be fixed, but no one's willing to make the tough decisions. I mean, there's going to be a pain point at some point in time, whether it's now or in the future. So I do. Can I just clarify one thing, Larry? So the FICA, the reason we continue to pay that is to cover that 65.9 trillion. That's how we're going to fund that.
We'll figure out, well, the accrued liabilities now,
The
because
accrued liabilities, right? Okay.
so the 65.9 will instantly drop because the projected benefit payments will be just what's accrued, and nobody will accrue a penny more of benefits under the old system.
Right.
That'll stop because
Because of that additional 10% that everyone's paying in for their own retirement.
yeah, you will have to keep paying your FICA taxes, but you
Right.
won't get your earnings record will be filled with zeros from day one of the reform. So when they come to calculate your benefits that are owed when you at 35 today, when you reach whatever 62, when you start collecting, or 65, or full retirement age 67,
Mhm.
they will calculate your benefits just like they currently, like under the current system. They won't change that, but your earnings record will have zeros in there from this year up till age 67 and beyond. If you keep working, you'll just not get any credit for that in terms of extra Social Security benefits for extra contributions, extra FICA payments. Sorry, that's the burden of where your parents and grandparents and great grandparents have put you, and we have screwed you over, younger people, and I want the screwing over to stop.
Yeah,
And give people
because
that
I continue to
feel.
hear, you're talking about Nikki Haley, kicking the can down the road and having, later full
Too little.
age retirements. And I've heard as late, full retirement age of 75. And, we're talking life expectancy of, for, you and me of, 80 years old or a little bit less. So, I'm not sure that makes sense as much as what you're proposing. So how are you getting this out there? Are you contacting the current candidates and saying, hey, here's a proposal that works, here's why it works, and can I talk to you about it? Is there any interest in that? Are they even reaching back out to you?
I would say, it's very disheartening. for example, the folks running no labels, I've written them, I've gotten their email address. They may put forward a third-party candidate in April. I've said, look, here's a platform. Whoever you choose, give them this platform, or even choose me to run, because I have run, and I can expound on how to fix things. You might sound crazy, but compared to somebody who's been indicted for 91 criminal charges, I don't have any criminal record. I don't have anybody accusing me of any crimes. I haven't. I'm not Senator Menendez, who's got a rap sheet now that well, he's not convicted, but so yeah, why not go for that kind of basically a technocrat to fix the country?
Or even Biden with all the charges, I mean, this is beyond a Republican or Democrat thing, because it doesn't matter what end of the spectrum that you're on. I mean, there's so much mud being flung from one to the other. There's charges against everybody. I think, as an American, I think we're all sick and tired of it. We just want, I think we're devoid of, the problem is we're devoid of leadership. That's the problem in DC. And I think that's what's lacking. And
so all these candidates, so the answer would be all these candidates, none of them have contacted me. I don't know if they know who I am, but so it hasn't been that Governor DeSantis had me down and said, let's talk about how to fix X, Y, and Z. He doesn't really want that. He just wants power. President Trump.
How about Biden? Has Biden reached out to you and said, okay, hey, let's fix this?
Biden's, I think there's one terrific rational person there. That's Janet Yellen. She's the Treasury Secretary. She's an economist. She actually was my former professor in my first year in grad school. And so she's doing a fabulous job for the country. In terms of Biden's economic policy, I think some of it's quite good, and some of it, but there's so many things that he's not gone after to fix because it's been very partisan. And he's got a lot of people that he's beholden to on the left that have, and then he's got a lot of economic advisors that are holdovers from or descendants of the economic advisors of Obama and Clinton. So nobody is talking kind of fundamental, hey, this needs to be fixed fundamentally. This needs to be, we need to have Medicare for all, like Bernie Sanders wants, but we need to do the Republican version of it, not the Democratic version, not the traditional Medicare, because that spending requiring us to spend, is driving us broke according to the CBO's projections. And that's part of why we're spending 80% of GDP, not 11% like Sweden does. So, we have very partisan people on both sides that are not providing leadership. And, lots of very critical domestic policy. I would say President Biden has been, in my view, terrific on foreign policy. Whereas I think the Republicans are, at least DeSantis, not Nikki Haley, but President Trump and DeSantis are basically kind of isolationists who will, so it's like 1933, Hitler has arisen in Germany, and they're Neville Chamberlain saying, oh, he's okay. He won't invade Poland. He won't invade Czechoslovakia. He won't take over all of Europe, France.
I get that.
He did. I mean, this is like.
Do you think, all right, so do you think the amount that we're spending without any accountability, I'll just use Ukraine, or when we pulled out of Afghanistan, the hundreds of billions of dollars that we left in equipment over there, the tens of billions of dollars that we've given to Ukraine, but we don't even know where it went. And it goes back to the accountability. There's two things that have to happen. The way that I see it is we need to have accountability and checks and balances and stop spending what we don't have. Because, to the point of Social Security, we're writing checks that we can't cover. And so we're leaving that for, our kids, our grandkids, and our great grandkids. And, any continued deficit spending is nothing more than deferred taxes. So, do you think that, we're talking about foreign policy, and it doesn't sound like it relates to everything that we're talking about as far as Social Security, but they really do go hand in hand. Because if we're spending money that we don't have and we don't even know where it's going, we don't have a series of checks and balances. Do you think that that's an issue?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. If I had been, I think the way I can appropriately kind of respond to that would be to say, had I been President Biden pulling out of Afghanistan, would I have done it differently? How should we have done it so that we didn't leave all that equipment uh, and leave the entire society at the hands of the Taliban? I think I probably would have given rifles, AK-47, whatever, M1s or M3, whatever our best, guns are to women, because they're the ones who've been the most oppressed, and make it clear to the oppressive males in that society that they were not going to be able to basically turn their female population back into slaves. And so I would also have thought through, this whole thing and not had this thing go down as a complete disaster. Now, part of this was that we had pulled out a lot of troops. We had made deals with the Taliban under President Trump, and he was kind of stuck with a bad hand. I don't know for sure all the details of what happened and how it could have been improved upon, but I would have anticipated this mess and said, let's game plan all the disasters of this exit, and make sure that the worst case scenario doesn't happen, which is what happened, and that we don't leave
Yeah.
all this stuff for these people.
Goes back to poor leadership,
Yeah.
right?
And then,
all the way across from military all the way up to the White House, right? I
yeah,
mean, there's
it
just,
takes, it is
yep.
leadership, as you said. And with Ukraine, absolutely, you need to have an inspector general of what you're, the nice thing about handing them a tank is that you can actually see the tank. You probably have a tracker. We can track our suitcases now. We probably have a way to track where that tank is. So we know that hasn't been kind of sold off to some country in Africa in order for somebody to line their pocket. So when it comes to military equipment, we should have a tracking system, electronic tracking system, and at a minimum. But if that hasn't happened, and it may well not have happened because we've seen such incompetence in Social Security for decades, it's quite possible that we have blown a lot of money. But on the other hand, the big story in Ukraine is that we have Hitler in the form of Putin on our border, which is Ukraine is our border, really, because if he goes through Ukraine, he will be into Finland, he will be into Poland, he will be into Romania. We will have young American soldiers dying, and we will be at war, and we might be at nuclear war with Russia. What we should have been doing has been much tougher with Russia I think, than Biden has been. So I applaud him for being aggressive to the point of, assembling a coalition to help Ukraine defend itself. But do I think he has done an A+ job? No. I think he's done a B+ job. I think we should have been giving the Ukrainians F-16s from the beginning and let them actually conduct a war where they had the right tools, so they could, and then, is it going to be the case that they're going to be able to recover the entire Ukrainian territory, or will there end up being a settlement where Russia does get some territory from eastern Ukraine and gets to hold on to Crimea? Yes, but then you would also want to say, we're going to do that, but at the same time, we're going to admit Ukraine into NATO. This should be with the president's proposal right now. In our current point in time, where things are, given everything, we should say we're going to push for a ceasefire where Russia gets to keep what it's got in Ukraine. Ukraine comes immediately into NATO and to the European Union, and now Ukraine has security because of Article 5 of the NATO protocol, which says that if Ukraine is further attacked, Russia would be at war with the U.S. We have to make clear to Putin what Neville Chamberlain did not make clear to Hitler, which was game over, boy. This is,
Well,
there's a limit.
let's go back to the funding part of it. So right now we're sending, I don't even know what the total figure is, but it's well over $100 billion that we've sent. I mean, we're actually funding their government, on top of all the military, and we're talking about the issues, as far as how dysfunctional Social Security is. Do you think it's hard for people to say, our government and the leadership is competent enough to make changes in Social Security if we can't even keep track of the money that we're sending, and we're actually funding another country's government and everything else? I mean, isn't that, I mean, it's a different issue, but it's all connected.
I wouldn't say, for Social Security, we have a documented case for how badly things have gone. In
Right.
Ukraine, basically things have gone really well, in the sense that Russia did not take over Ukraine. The Ukrainians, God bless them, fought back and are very brave people, and they've used our help and that of Europe. And Europe actually, I think this year is contributing more financially to Ukraine than the U.S. is. They've succeeded. This is a success story.
So other nations have contributed more than the U.S. has?
Right now, I think the current, I think in the last 12 months, the Europeans have put in more money than we have. I can't swear, but that's some fact that I read from a credible source a couple of days ago. I can't recall exactly what it's from.
Okay.
But should we be keeping track? Absolutely. But
Yeah. Because it just goes to, making sure that, our money, we keep paying more and more in taxes, right? And so you're going back to the plan as far as fixing Social Security, continuing to pay FICA at a lesser level, but still high. And then, paying an additional 10% of our own money. But if we have to keep raising taxes because we're continuing to spend way more than what we have, and a big part of that is because we're funding all these welfare programs, right? I'm using that as a general term to include, funding Ukraine and their government, and we're not being fiscally responsible and tracking even where that money's going. I think that's going to be a hard pill to swallow for Americans.
Yeah, I agree 100%. We need to track every penny we spend in Ukraine, and I don't, that's the military's responsibility in large part, and they've got inspectors, and they should have a record, and we should be having the head of these procurement agencies, or who's ever making these transfers to Ukraine should be brought in front of Congress and say, can you tell us where the money is? What's happened to it?
And stop funding until we get some answers.
But the idea that Ukraine is a welfare state of ours, that I have to jump off, because these people are dying every day trying to defend us. I mean, the Ukrainians
how are they defending us? I mean,
because if they were to say, okay, we're going to hand over our country to Russia, if they had folded, and they may well fold if they don't get extra support militarily, if they run out of ammunition, which is what some members of Congress apparently would like to see. Russia will take over Ukraine, and then Russia will move on to the Baltics, and they'll move into Poland, and we will be at war, and this will be World War III, and this could be a nuclear war. So they are protecting us. They are, if you like, our mercenaries, if you want, but they are protectors. So to say that they are dying and getting injured, and they're making an enormous sacrifice. and they're killing, lots and lots of Russian soldiers who are aggressing against, in effect, us. So they're our front line of protection. We have to defend ourselves. And this is the cheapest way for us in terms of blood and bone to protect ourselves, is to let the Ukrainians defend their country with our economic and support in terms of equipment and tanks and ammunition and other munitions. So
Mhm.
I think that tracking this money is important, but it's the sideshow. The big picture, just like we wouldn't want to say Social Security is doing such a terrible job that we need to cut off all the benefit payments to current, just shut the whole thing down and not make a single payment to anybody for like 3 years until we get it sorted out as to what's going on, and then we'll set the system up
Well,
again. In the
I think
meantime,
that's, yeah,
3
that's
years
kind
of
of
people
apples, and
dying.
I think that's an apples and oranges kind of an argument. And I'm not, and I hear what you're saying with Ukraine. I disagree. Um, but I
But
think I'd like to have you back on the podcast to talk about that, because I think we could talk about that for at length.
And then
Uh,
let me just ask you, what would you
yeah.
do? Would you cut off, I mean, let's say you are in charge of all aid to Ukraine, military aid, uh, not just for the US, but also from Western Europe. Would you cut them off and say, sorry, guys, no extra ammunition, no F-16s, no extra tanks, no extra missile systems, and let them get run over? And then where do you think we
No,
finish?
actually, what I would do is I would say, all right, let's figure out where every penny went. What did you do with it? Were you responsible? And start there, and say, all right,
So
before you
in the
get
meantime,
another,
right
well,
today,
so that's part one. All right. So the second step is go to NATO and say, look, we've been paying the lion's share of NATO for decades. It's time for you guys to step up now. And you just said that, they've paid more than we have in the last 12 months. I'll have to look into that.
no,
Um,
but
but
let me say, I agree with you 100%. I've written in just the other day that I'm aghast at the fact that the European Union is not spending 12% of GDP on defense, only they're spending less than 2%. So I agree 100% with you on that. But what I'm saying is that we can't let, we have to fix these things, but we have to do it in the right just like we can't leave Afghanistan the wrong way. We can't fix these things the wrong way either. We have to do it via transition where we
yes.
immediately start looking at what's going on, and having people testify as to where the money has gone. But in the meantime, we have to give them ammunition. We cannot.
Yeah, but it
Can't
also goes back to what you were
them
saying
all.
about with Wall Street, right? I mean, where's the money going? Who's being enriched by this war? And just like with what happened in Afghanistan, we were talking about tracking, equipment, and tanks. Well, I mean, we know where everything is in Afghanistan. We left it all behind, and it's our enemies that are now using it to attack us, right? And our allies. So, in order to make sure that that's not happening in Ukraine, that same thing, we need to figure out where the money's going. And look, I am not a military strategist by any stretch of the
You
imagination.
wouldn't want to, if it was the situation that they were about to get overrun because they're running out of ammunition and equipment, you wouldn't want that to happen. So I'm just saying we have a lot of objectives here with the Ukraine. We want to achieve all of them, but we don't want to kind of lose the sight of the big picture here, which the big picture is that Russia is the aggressor, and that Russia will be we will be at war with Russia unless we stop them in Ukraine. And in order to do that, the Ukrainians need the missiles, they need the tanks, they need the ammunition, they need the shells, they need the F-16s. They need all that support, and they need to and we need to make sure that they're using it against the Russians, not selling it to
Absolutely.
somebody, some
Yep.
third party, and I think
I think we can agree on that for sure. Absolutely. Because it sounds
I
like
would
that's
say,
almost what's happening. Because it's not getting over there. In the
I
money.
haven't heard that we have any Abrams tanks, for example, that are, showed up in Guyana.
Yeah, those are a little harder to hide for sure, for
Yeah,
sure.
so I think that these these huge missile defense systems, they are sitting there in Ukraine being used to fight the Russians. So I think if there's an issue here, it's probably small order, is my sense. But I'd like to find out. I'm with you. So I think you and we could run the country perfectly fine. And
Oh, I don't know about that. I don't know. I definitely have my
I'd be
opinions, but
happy to have you as
I'm
my
I'm not
vice
an expert
president.
on that side of the equation by any stretch.
Common
So
sense, what you're saying and what I'm saying is that we need to have common sense people who are
yes.
not crazies. We have people that are very political, that I view as somewhat crazy. And then we have people that are really lunatics, in my view, who are trying to, somebody says, I'm going to be a dictator when I take over the office, even for a day. You can do a lot of damage in one day if you sign enough things that have been prepared for you to sign. Sorry, go live in a world with other dictators. You go to Russia and retire there.
Yeah, exactly. All these executive orders, I'm not a fan of them on either side of the equation, but closing the borders, making sure the
Absolutely
back
agree.
ends,
Absolutely agree.
all
We cannot have people pouring
yes,
into the country. We
that's
need to
right.
defend their border. I wrote, if people go to larrykotlikoff.substack.com, you'll see a column. My most recent newsletter says dumbstruck. That's the name of, and one of the things I said, was I'm dumbstruck that this guy, President Trump, with 91 counts, criminal counts against him, is running for president, and that he can publicly declare he's going to be a dictator for as long as he wants to be.
I don't think
And I'm
he
also
said
dumbstruck, but
that.
I'm also dumbstruck that we have so many, we have no control of the border after so many years and so many administrations. So I am listing
Or how
things.
about the current administration? I mean, Mayorkas. I mean, it's all they have to do is enforce the laws that they're there, and actually, instead of continuing to build the fence, they actually sold the steel, and now we're having to buy it. They sold it at a fire sale, and now they're having to rebuy it at a much higher cost. So,
I'm not defending uh, anything that I don't know about. I don't know about this. All I know is that we have a huge problem there, and it has to be fixed. It has to be fixed
so
by people with common sense and humanity, not to put people in cages. So there is the right policy, and that's why when you asked at the beginning, why did I get into this kind of business? Because I think that there are solutions, and that
yes, absolutely.
we
And
got to just.
Social Security, I definitely like what you have to say on some of the other stuff. I think we could agree to disagree
Well, I
on
don't know. I don't think you're up for having your son or my son in a year fight the Russians in Poland. I don't think that's
not
what you're.
under the current leadership. I would definitely agree with you there. So Larry, look, I know we are short on time. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. I really want to have you back on because I'm telling you, this has been a great discussion, and I'd like to further it. I really would,
Okay.
because it's been great. And again, so how can people find you again?
Okay. So LarryKotlikoff.net, or sorry, yeah. Sorry, Kotlikoff.net, just my last name.net, KOTLIKOFF is my main website. There's links there to all my books, to my company's software, which is really terrific for your own personal financial planning and your Social Security calculations and decisions, making sure that you're not getting overpaid or underpaid, you're getting the right amount. And then there's LarryKotlikoff.substack.com. People can sign up for my newsletter and podcast, and we have all kinds of really fantastic people coming on the podcast to talk about all manner of issues, whether it's poetry or what's going on in the UK and with Brexit. It's just really fascinating. The people have gotten to come along. Yesterday I was talking to the finance minister from Chile about Argentina and Chile and what's happening in Latin America. I have, because I'm old and have had enough experience, know lots of people in the real world who can talk about their areas of the world and their areas of expertise, and so this is a very different podcast than anything that's out there. So LarryKotlikoff.substack.com and Kotlikoff.net. You can learn all about everything that I have to offer here. So anyway, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And, I can't wait to have you back on. All right. Take care.
Happy to come back. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to The Retirement Trainer with your host, Ed Siddell. For our latest retirement news and financial tips, please visit egsi.financial.com or follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Thank you for listening to our podcast. We look forward to having you back for our next episode, where we will continue to explore the world of retirement. Until then, please remember to click, like, and subscribe. See you next episode.